Love languages are not real, and they're actually potentially detrimental to relationships. And here's why. We're going to be telling you 4 different reasons as to why we believe the 5 love languages are not an appropriate way to go about a relationship. Now, Tom and I weren't always this way. We actually just recently came up with this idea, but we talked about the love languages early on in our relationship.
We're breaking cycles, one day at a time. Just breathe, let it flow. Watch our love grow.
So if you know what the 5 love languages are, you probably know exactly which is your top and which is your bottom. For those of you who don't know what the love languages are, they are 5 different love languages that indicate to your partner what you need the most and what's going to fill that love tank. So we've got words of affirmation, acts of service, gifts, physical touch, and quality time. Did I get them all?
Yep.
Was that all?
Yep, we got 5. There's 5 I counted.
Okay, good.
So here are the reasons why we think that love languages doesn't work, and couples use it almost in a way that is very shallow. And, I feel like most of us use it in a way to fix problems, right? To create a bonding experience between, the 2 people.
Yeah, it's a huge misconception between thinking that this is just how you are loved and like, this is just what I need because this is, a way to love me and show me that you love me. But like you said, it's a lot deeper than that. And we're going to dive into that.
Point number 1 of why the love language just doesn't work is that we are expecting our partner to fill our love tank. Mm-hmm. And so for me, using me as a perfect example, when we first started dating, I told you what my love languages was. And so, when I feel like I'm not being loved, I'm expecting you to provide services to me to make me feel loved. Mm-hmm. So for example, my number 1 was physical touch. And my way of filling up my love tank was us being physical with each other.
In the bedroom.
In the bedroom, yeah. Not so much holding hands and this and that. And so when I wasn't getting enough of that, for sure I felt some certain type of ways. I definitely felt like you don't love me for sure back in the day. And I just feel like each day that I wasn't getting my needs met, it felt very much like, wow, like I'm questioning a relationship. And when you have a very fresh, young relationship, it was definitely straining on the relationship, I would say.
It's not even like it was a new relationship, which obviously meant, it happened a lot more than after you have kids, right?
Yes.
So it's just like, it's not like it wasn't happening.
No.
It was
Yeah, it wasn't every day.
This is the kind of pressure I had that Tom put on me, is to, fill this need of his that just was unobtainable for me. Like, I feel like no matter how many, like we could have, had sex 5 times a day and you probably would have been like, oh, it wasn't 6. You know what I mean? Like, it would always be a new standard. And so that is why we feel that one of these points is, you're expecting someone to fill that love that you are lacking in some capacity within yourself.
Not everybody think about, sex or like physical, like not everybody is on the same page as that. Like you don't really know what kind of stuff the other person has gone through, or going through. So it's just because you have this one thing you need. It's a very selfish thing, right? It's like, I need this. I don't really care what you're going on here, but I need this one thing. Mm-hmm. So you have to comply to like my rules now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to sum all that up is, if you have one specific love language that you need, that's your top, you're expecting someone else to fill that need for you, and you're expecting them to meet it with the perfect standard. You're already like putting so much pressure on them. And then you're also disappointed when those needs aren't met, or if they're met in a certain type of way that's not what you expect, then it also, makes you frustrated as well. Because with Tom as an example, again, for me, physical touch was holding hands, giving hugs, like cuddling on the couch. Like those were ideas for me of being physical with you. And that just wasn't landing and going both ways. So.
Right. So there's a miscommunication within that as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a miscommunication. Yeah. And we didn't really talk about that until after we had kids, basically. Yeah. That became a clarity for us of like, oh, wait, like oh, it could be more than just sex.
Another question that you should be asking yourself is, not why my partner should fill my love tank, but why does her tank leak so fast?
So, and all that now leads into point number 2, basically, is you're only feeling loved one way. So your top was physical touch, sure. But what about all the other ones?
Nope.
Didn't matter, right? And so it's very interesting that we are picking and choosing our tops and like expecting our partners to meet these needs, when in reality, a very beautiful relationship should look like all of these things, all of these languages.
So yeah, my number 2 was quality time. And I feel like, yeah, that I would say that was equally as important because, at the beginning of a relationship, like you're kind of like that fine line of like, am I seeing you too much or are we being together too often? But no, for me, it was like, I want to spend more time with you. So it was, very much equal as important. But since we kind of expressed ourselves like, this is my number 1, it was very much like I was always expecting that from you. In a healthy relationship, all 5 of these should be almost as equal to each other. We've been together for almost 8 years now. And our definition of love is very different than what our definition of love was when we were dating in the beginning. And looking at it now, if I were to give myself some advice to my younger self, it would very much be, if you expect to receive love from just one thing, you are almost doomed to fail, because it's impossible to just expect from the one thing. That is way too much pressure. But if your partner, vacuums the house, or, she went to the gas station and got your chocolate bar, or she told you that she loves you, there's like 3 love languages that are being expressed right there. And you, as a spouse, you should be able to recognize that and be like, oh, wow, like my love tank is getting filled from these things.
And also, not only that, but if you're expecting one of these needs to be met all the time, and then let's say I was able to do that for you, it's like, okay, all Tom needs is this 5 times a day. Eventually, it'd be like, what else is there? Like, I feel like the relationship would have no substance, right? Because it would all be about this physical aspect. But it's like, what about, the quality time that we could be building relationships with communication? So when you're expecting top notch in one of these aspects, then you're going to lose out on a whole bunch of other things within your partner. And then eventually it's just going to fizzle out, you would think, right? It's not sustainable to do that one thing all the time, because like you said, there could be 3 or 4 different love languages within an hour span of time. That could be missed.
And, for those of you watching right now, stick to the end, because, not only do we not think that love languages are not real, but we've actually come up with our own connection languages or love languages that we think that will work way better and will develop in a much deeper relationship with you and your partner. So stick around to the end to find that out.
Just a quick pause from the video. If you guys are enjoying it, we would love it if you gave us a thumbs up and help us beat some records of previous likes on our videos. That would be super helpful. We would also love a comment below to hear what your top languages were when you were talking about them with your partner. And has it worked? Let us know.
So point number 3 would be, if my spouse knows my love language, our relationship will improve. Now, let's just use our example. Did our relationship improve based on, that conversation that we had with our love languages?
No, I feel like it definitely put a lot of strain, I would say, actually, on our relationship. I think that it started building resentments in certain capacities because, for example, my top was acts of service. And so that led you to be like, oh, if I keep doing this for you, then you're always going to expect it, right? So then it became this resentments between like, oh, if I do too much, then it's going to be expected of me always. And so we had those issues, I would say.
Yeah. And for me, since we talked about love languages and what mine was, and I feel like if, when I'm feeling down or when my love tank is low or whatever, and you know my language and you didn't provide that for me, I feel like it was always like a very much like she knows what it is.
Right.
Like, why didn't you do it?
Exactly.
It's like, ugh, like it's, it's just one of those things. It's expectations.
It almost feels like it became our identities in a way. Like, this is who I am, and you know what I need for you to fill this. So, like, why aren't you doing it? And I feel like once you start talking about those love languages and getting them like expressed and out there, then yeah, it literally becomes like, this is who I am and this is what I need. This
Exactly.
is what our relationship is.
Yeah.
And I think that that actually had quite an effect on our relationship early on because we were like, these were sort of our identities in the relationship now.
Well, yeah, we kind of went a little deeper than that, right? Because I was like, as a child, I never got much physical touch, and like I never got many like affirmations and stuff like that. So it's like, so I think we discussed that, and I, kind of like talked about how much it meant to me and stuff like that. But again, it's just unrealistic expectations to expect it from just one area. Love comes from many, many areas as we, you know, experience life a little bit more. We discover that, and we talked about it in one of our podcasts too.
You guys are going to learn a lot of valuable information later on in the video, but for now, I just want to mention that you'll want to stick around to the end because we're also going to be giving you a free gift, and it's super special. So make sure to stick around. So that leads us into point number 4, and that point is that these love languages are actually the surface level of what's actually deeper and beneath those levels, which is actually probably stemming from your childhood and traumas that you have had happen.
So, it kind of springs another question is, what if your love language is simply the thing you missed most growing up? So let's talk about that a little bit more. So, words of affirmation. If you're someone who has words of affirmation at the very top of your love language, what does that actually mean? On the surface, it just kind of means like, I like hearing I love you. I like hearing how much I care about you. I like, positivity words. But is it deeper than that?
Yeah, if you really break it down, the stem of this is that you probably were heavily criticized and there was a lot of negative talks through your childhood. Were you praised often? Probably not. I also feel like it goes slightly deeper in the ways that if you wanted to use these love language, I had certain love language expectations from my parents as well. So like for words of affirmation, that would probably be my top one around my dad. Like I needed to hear him say certain things. He never said he was proud of me. He never said I love you. And I craved those things from him. So I would try to like make him say those things to me. Eventually, when I was going to my mom's one day, I gave him a kiss on the cheek and said, I love you. And that was the hardest thing I could have ever done but I needed him to say it back. And he did. And it was like the best feeling ever. And I will forever remember that moment. Like those were big things that I needed from my dad because I never got them. So it's interesting thinking about that with your parents too, because I have certain arrangement of these love languages with different people. But anyways, again, so that is why like this is what I'm saying, like with words of affirmation, like a lot of people could crave this because they didn't have it from other aspects of their lives.
Yeah, and being heavily criticized, me growing up, I've been criticized for everything, right? Like with grades, with I'm not behaving as well, how tall I am, how short I am, how big I am, it's always something, right? How my skin looks and this and that. And so yeah, I feel like knowing that and knowing that now, like words of affirmation, I really crave that as well.
But because that trauma wasn't the top trauma that you've experienced, it wasn't as important on your list at that time, right?
Right.
So even though we think that we need these certain ones as our tops, again, that just goes to show that like, if you still aren't getting those words of affirmation in in the first few years of our relationship, like you still would have said something and it still would have affected you. Like, like did you say I love you today? Or, like, cause you have said that to me in the past before. So again, like they do keep popping up. It just depends on the level of what kind of trauma you have experienced.
And so, stick around to the end as we are going to go over some of the solutions that we have to heal these kind of traumas. So to move on to the next point is physical touch. And that was my number one, right? My number one, the way to fill my love tank, it was physical intimacy for me. And to go over my childhood, like I was never hugged. I wasn't even given like a high five. It was very much just like you're kind of on your own. You're in your own bubble.
Because I remember when we first started dating, like I think you put your hand on my leg or something and your mom was just like unimpressed with that. Remember? She was like, "Ooh, you guys are touching too much or something."
Oh, right.
Do you
Yeah.
remember that?
Yeah. It was very much emotionally distant, right? Like, I never got too close to my mom. We were just like two peas in different pots.
Right.
And yeah, growing up, it was very much like you're kind of on your own in many aspects. Like, I'm physically there for you, like, of course. But yeah, just the emotional side. And, a hug means a lot, right? Like, when you hug somebody and you really like hold them in there, there's a lot of chemicals being exchanged during that moment. And like, especially when a child is in a tantrum and they're just like freaking out, like, it'd be surprising what a hug, like a deep hug, would do for them.
A genuine
A
hug,
genuine
right?
hug.
Not one just like, ugh,
Yeah.
right? Because they can feel that. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, all those endorphins that are like passed through, it's crazy. And this is kind of interesting to me because physical touch was never something, and this is why I think we bumped heads a little bit, because physical touch for me, I never received it as much either. I think my mom gave it to me more so than my dad, clearly. But like I never got hugs very often, and so my friends, like, they would hug me and I'd be like, ugh, like, this is so awkward. Like, I don't know what to do. And so they would eventually keep hugging me because I never liked hugs back then because I don't think I received them very often. So it's interesting because like I too didn't receive that stuff either. So why is it that you hung on to that and I didn't? Instead, for me, I was like, ugh, physical touch is at the bottom because like it's
Yeah.
interesting, right? Because
Yeah. Again, just traumas, right?
like for you, that was a big thing that you needed.
But
Yeah.
like you said, you had your own traumas, right? When you
True.
were
That were bigger than a hug. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? Like, I feel like those things really matter. It's just like, which is the top trauma for you? Because that's what's going to be your top list
Yeah.
for your needs.
So true. And that was, I would say, growing up, that was my top trauma, was that like I wasn't securely attached to anybody. And that's
Lot.
alone. I had no siblings. And like, my mom and I, like, even though she's my mom, but like, we're just, again, two peas in different pots. And it's just, yeah, I just felt very alone.
Whereas for me, like, I have siblings all the time. Like, I needed space.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I need the freaking space.
Yeah.
But I guess this goes to show that, like, we could have experienced similar aspects. But again, it's which trauma is the highest ranking for you. So let's move on to quality time. So this is probably for kids whose parents were very absent. They probably worked a lot, or they just, up and left for who knows whatever reasons. Oh, work came first always. And then another one is probably like you never felt chosen ever. You were never a priority.
Which makes a lot of sense because I'm sure that's a trauma within itself. So, as an adult, you grow up and yeah, again, like I feel like not being a priority in anybody's life, I'm sure you would pick quality of time as a way to kind of show the other person like, this is the way to fill my love tank. Mm-hmm. And this is the way to like fill my void of trauma in some sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so this would probably be somebody who's always there, who's always around, because it's like they fear missing out, right? It's probably like that FOMO situation is like you're fearing what you're not going to get if you're not there. So that's why you're always around, always wanting that quality time with people.
Yeah.
So that could be a personality trait of yours, is you're just always wanting to be there, no matter what the situation, with your friends, with your partner. And, to sum that all up, time represents something that you never had or you lost.
So, for anyone who picks acts of service as their number one love language, a typical trauma that they probably had to go through as a kid was that you had to carry too much responsibility. So, either someone in your household needed you quite often through addiction, or maybe one of your parents was disabled. There was just like way too much on your plate. And, you were being, I think there's a term called parentification, where you become either a parent too early or you had to grow up too fast. And then another trauma was that nobody helped you. You were just doing things alone too often, and just there was no one there for you. And then lastly, you had to be independent way too early. Another characteristic trauma of someone who likes active service is that, you became independent too early. So that either meant, you were just being left alone too much as a kid. So you had to like cook for yourself, you had to like clean and to fend for yourself quite a bit. And so, yeah, I can see someone who's gone through that, and that's their way of like receiving love now. If someone could do this for me, it fills my void of trauma.
Because acts of service was obviously my number one. And you could probably understand if you watched a few of our other videos. Yeah, so if you watched our addiction video, you can go check that one out. But that has a very clear indication as to why acts of service would be my number one, because that was probably my biggest trauma. And then the divorce as well. So acts of service was my number one for various reasons. One of the biggest reasons is our previous video about the cost of addiction. That one was pretty big for me, where I had to start stepping up and taking care of the alcoholics in my family. And yeah, it really made me become an adult a lot earlier. This happened when I was about 12 years old. So I was the one taking care of everybody else. No one was taking care of me, or it felt that way anyways. Like my mom was still around. She still, but she worked a lot. She was providing money for the family because my parents got divorced. There was a lot of absences. There was a lot of me taking care of myself or others. And so that's where a lot of that really came from. Okay, and lastly, we have gifts. And this has kind of a bad rep because it makes you feel almost as if,
Materialistic.
like, yeah, you're very materialistic. Like, you need all of these things and, like, oh, what a gold digger. Or, like, somebody who always expects money, gifts, that kind of thing. But in reality, it's a little deeper than that.
In reality, it's someone who wants to be remembered. It's like, because when you give somebody, it's like, wow, you remembered me. Or like, oh, wow, you remember that one thing that I wanted. And I feel like that's very important for that person. So maybe in the past, they were forgotten. They weren't remembered. And so another thing would be, being thought about, right? The thoughtful, like, wow, I'm in your head. You thought about me. So yeah, this is someone who had a trauma of maybe low self-esteem. Maybe just, again, wasn't priority in someone's life. And lastly, it's just feeling significant. Like, wow, I feel important.
Or, right, you're always on somebody's mind.
Yes.
I feel like, because I think gifts was up there on my priority thing as well.
It was
And
number 2, 3.
I think it was number 2.
Yeah.
What did that indicate to you do you remember what you thought about that?
Oh, man.
Did you think I was being materialistic and wanted...
Probably a little bit, but I think the other part was just like, yeah, I don't know. I think what I thought was just like, you just liked present. You like being thought about. I think that was for me.
Right.
But the biggest thing is like, you just wanted me to remember the stuff that we've talked about together, and that I remember that for you, and I got it for you. So that was a big part.
And I think that for me, this one kind of got a little tricky, right? Because it wasn't just whatever gift you got for me. And that's the other misconception, right? It's just like any gift. It's like, no, it's a little bit more than that. Like, it needs to be well thought out. Like, again, if I'm talking about this specific, I don't know, what's a good example? Like, let's say I'm talking about a specific Pokemon. Like, there's this rare Pikachu Pokemon that I really want. And then you go out and get me a starter pack. It's just like,
Right.
almost missed the mark,
Yes.
It's like, this is kind of like, you're just doing it because you're like, ugh, I just got to quickly pick this up.
Right.
But it's like the idea and the thought behind it, like, it can literally be something as simple as food, right? It's like, we talked about getting this certain pizza place, and then you show up with like, Costco pizza, and it's like, like almost there.
And now I'm getting complaints about this is the worst pizza I've ever had.
It was
Really?
bad. It was so bad.
Is Costco pizza that bad?
Anyways, the point is, like, it's very much, it's specific things, or even like handmade things. Like, I think the best gift that you ever gave me was after we got pregnant with our first, and you did like trimester packages. And for me, it was like, wow, like, you really care, because I'm the one carrying the baby. I'm the one suffering through all of these symptoms, this and that. But like, the fact that you did this, and for each trimester, it meant a lot, because it meant that you were thinking about me, even though you weren't dealing with the actual physicalities of carrying a baby. You knew that I was. And those are the kind of like intricacies that goes behind a gift, right? For people that didn't receive certain things, they were never remembered. And, for me, not being heard a lot, or being always second choice, that was a big thing for me. Like, certain gifts were a big thing. So that kind of sums up the reasons behind that.
So let's go deeper into, why love languages are basically useless. It doesn't really improve the bonding between you and your spouse. If anything, it kind of creates more distance between the two people, because, there's a lot of understanding that needs to happen within those fine lines of love. And so we're going to dive even deeper into the theory now. So, instead of asking what someone's love language is, you could be asking, why is that your love language? Why is acts of service your top? Why is physical touch? And from there, you could really start some really, really interesting conversations with that person. And then to dive even deeper than that, what if your love language is actually your childhood wounds? So the reason why we came out with these new love languages, as they call it, we're going to call them the 5 wound languages instead, is because we believe that the love languages is too shallow. It's just too surface. It doesn't really do anybody any good. We believe that love tank is not someone else, that someone does for you, but is what you can do within yourself. So by healing these wound languages, you can actually become happier. The bond between your spouse can be stronger and tighter. And then you no longer need the love languages. Instead, you can just be a happy person by yourself.
So, we'll tell you what replaces what.
So this is the abandonment wound. And this actually replaces the quality of time, because we believe that the person who craves quality time in a love language is somebody who probably went through divorce. They probably went through a parent leaving, probably some sort of addiction within the family, workaholic parents, frequent separations from the parents or one of their loved ones, or one of their parents were emotionally unavailable. So now the child grows up and he or she may think that, well, the person I love leave me too. I think these are a better way of talking about love, right? Than me saying like, oh, I love quality time, so just spend more time with me and magically my love cup will be full. But I think it's important to talk about why you crave quality time. And yeah, I think a lot of these points that we have brought up is the reason why. It's because when I was a child, I felt like quality time wasn't on my side. I felt like my love was conditional. And yeah, I think it's important to talk about these things because that can create some sort of compassion within one another versus then just like, you need quality time, so I'm going to try to give it to you. And when it's not enough, then we get angry at each other. So I think that's why these wound languages replaces love languages.
Yeah, and I think the love languages are very surface. Yeah, they're just very surface level. And it's just instilled in us to believe that these are just like, oh, it's just your personality. But like, no, like we have learned, we've experienced all of this, and it is much, much deeper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it's not really about the quality time spent together, but it's me, trying to prove to you that like I'm here for you, I'm here with you. And yeah, it's a lot deeper than that.
I feel like if the love languages were actually to work the way that they were intended, it would have to be that if you didn't receive the things, you wouldn't be so defensive or hurt about it. Right? Like if it was just an extra on top of, the cherry on top of your ice cream, like if you were a very emotionally stable person already, those would just be additional bonuses, right? Quality time would be additional because you got a little extra, but it wouldn't be something that's constantly filling your tank, like you said, right? So that's why I think we're very confused, and that's why it's kind of detrimental because now you're putting these expectations on people and it's just unrealistic.
I find that like we mentioned previously, like even if you did get all the quality time you had, there is still like a bit of that void, right? And I feel like, sometimes you do get all the quality time that you want, but you're still unhappy. So it's just, I feel like that would like really mess someone up to be like, I'm giving you time. And then when they get into arguments, it's like, no, like we just spent all these time last week or last month or yesterday. But yet, why are we in these situations still? Like why are we disagreeing and arguing about these little things?
And again, it's because we know that somebody else is not going to fill void that you're missing, right? We know that it comes a lot deeper. You need to understand where that is coming from for you to actually heal from it. You can't expect someone else to heal it for you by filling your love tanks up with these languages.
And okay, sorry guys, we'll keep going, I swear. But again, that's why it's so important to talk about the wound instead of the love, is because the love is just, what you think you need. But healing the wound is actually what makes you feel content, fulfilled, and potentially happy.
that someone else isn't meant to fill for you. It's supposed to come from within. And they've always said this, you need to love yourself first before you can love somebody else. And talking about these wounds instead is allowing your partner to help you and assist you in those healing processes versus making them feel like they're now responsible for your happiness.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm gonna keep going. Because that's one more thing that popped in my mind. I think, again, I'm paraphrasing it, but Dr. Gabor Mate once said that, when you fall in love with somebody and you fall deeply in love with somebody, that person will reveal your greatest trauma. But like he said, like that person that you love will almost be like your worst enemy because that person will reveal all the traumas that you have.
You're
and
right.
It's true. And sorry, we're whispering because we're filming. We had to film a second time because we want to get this right. And now we're filming at like 9:30 p.m. at night. So
10.
our kids are sleeping 10 now. So that's why we're whispering.
Yeah, so if our voices have changed drastically,
Yes.
because we're trying to be
We
somewhat
have 3
quiet.
kids are sleeping.
And we were fighting with them till about 9:30 to go to
Yes,
sleep. So,
yes.
Okay. So the next one we're going to be replacing is words of affirmation. And our replacement is the rejection wound. So this is the common question of, am I enough? So basically childhood experiences would be never measuring up, criticized all the time, or feeling unwanted. So some examples of this would be, always being compared to your siblings if you have any, constant criticisms. It could also show up in bullying. It could show up in emotional dismissals. It can show up with high expectations from your parents. So basically, words of affirmation, it's really not about, the compliments or the high achievements. It's more so about, thinking that you have value, you have self-worth. And I was thinking about this recently, and it's pretty interesting because love languages, I've realized, because words of affirmation was never the top of our list for you and I. However, that being said, when I really think about it, words of affirmation was something that I really, really thrived for when it came to my dad, because he was never somebody who said, I love you. He never said he was proud of me. It was always like me striving to get that attention from him. I remember this one time specifically, like I was going back to my mom's after my parents got divorced, and I was at his house. I was about to leave, and I desperately wanted him to say, I love you and I'll see you next week. And for that to happen, I needed to be the one to say I love you first, because he would never say that to me. So I remember going up to him, kiss him on the cheek, and I said, I love you. Because it was just not something that we ever said to each other. I desperately needed to hear that. So words of affirmation was something that I really wanted from my dad specifically. And it's because I never got it, right? So it's just interesting because that was very apparent in that relationship. But with you and I, it was never really a top one. So it's interesting to think that these wounds can actually show up in various ways with different people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it kind of makes sense too, right? Because as an adult who craves words of affection, it can show up in perfectionism, people pleasing, overachieving, and all of these traits, because you're trying to prove something to someone, right? You're wanting to hear those words again from the ones that you really care about, right? I'm proud of you, like I love you, wow, you did a great job. And so, but yeah, I feel like for a person who strives for the words of affirmation, yeah, like deep inside, like you said, like they're looking for that approval. Like that's really all they're looking for, right? Like they're looking for like, hey, I am worthy, but I need someone else to let me know that, because
Right.
I can't do it myself.
Okay, so the core root of words of affirmation is really just knowing that, you have value, that you are worthy of somebody's time. You are worthy in somebody else's eyes, rather than having to do all of these things to prove that you are.
So the next one would be physical touch, which was my number one when we first met. That was like my number one love language. Like you could not show me that enough. And so we actually replaced with something called the detached wound. Stuff like emotionally distanced parents, little physical affection, not being comforted when upset, being told to toughen up, and then, feeling emotionally alone. And so these definitely all hit the checklist I've had growing up. And so, as an adult now, it makes sense that I would want those things, right? I just thought that's what I wanted because I'm a dude, and just what I wanted. And so when we first started dating, yeah, I really craved things like hugs, cuddles, and physical closeness. And I felt disconnected when we didn't have those things. And yeah, again, it all stems from my childhood, just feeling alone, feeling, somebody, I wish that somebody would have just comforted me through physical affection.
Okay, next up is acts of service. Instead of those words, we're going to be replacing it with the burden wound. So basically, an experience that you would have as a child is too much responsibility too early. So things like parentification, it's where, you are taking on the responsibility of acting like a parent to somebody else potentially, or you're just caring for your siblings too much. You're emotionally supporting your parents. Again, you're growing up too fast. And basically, at this point, you learned that asking for help wasn't really necessarily safe to do so. And that stems altogether as, everything is on me.
So how does this show up, when you're adult?
So obviously that acts of service was my top one, right? And so basically I had a lot of difficulty asking for help, which is why I would expect you to do those acts for me. And there's that classic saying like, I can't read your mind, right? So it was one of those things where I always wanted you to do things, but I didn't want to have to ask for it. There's tons of burnout. There's feeling resentful when I'm not feeling supported, hyper independence, constantly caring for everyone else's problems. And that was a huge, that's how a lot of it showed up for me.
Yeah, so you growing up, obviously, you had to care for an older sibling of yours. And so you had to become a parent like real quick in life. Mm-hmm. And so, like I wonder if that stemmed from you now, you had to give so much when you were little. And so that was your trauma. Your trauma was, my way of showing love is me giving acts of service to someone else.
So bottom line is I just wanted to feel supported by somebody else, not by me having to support myself or support everyone else around me. And that shows up a lot in our parenting as well, where I'm, when everybody needs something from me, I get really stressed out. And again, it's literally because of the traumas that I had.
Yeah. And, I feel like I didn't really fully understand the wound that you've had caring for an older sibling because of an addiction. I feel like I didn't really fully understand it until later in our relationships. It was very much like I knew all about it. I knew that you went to Al-Anon and, all the stuff you gone, but I didn't really know the specific details of it all. So yeah, again, sometimes it's hard to talk about these things. Sometimes we bury it too deeply and we don't want to bring it up again. But it's really to understand, what your partner goes through. Because again, like, you're not knowing these things. Like, these things are hard to talk about. But it's really important because, again, we need to develop compassion. That is the main goal here, is develop compassion for the other person, so that when these traumas take over them, when the trauma takes over your mind and now all of a sudden you become, not the person that you want to be, compassion for the other person helps you through that because, now it's like, okay, I understand your trauma, so therefore I am here for you. What can I do for you? Instead of like, oh, why is she so pissy? It's just like, again, understanding.
When we first talked about these languages, it was funny because I remember you saying like, your stepdad does a lot for you and like, I'm not gonna be doing all that for you. Like, my stepdad was very much like giving all the time. So if it's like, oh, are you hungry? I'll just go make you a sandwich, like he would always whip up supper, or he'd invite everyone. Like, he was very, very giving in those ways. And we took it as like, I was kind of treated like a princess in those kind of ways. And so for you, I think you had the understanding like, whoa, like I'm not going to be like friggin' like bowing down to you doing all of these acts of service. And so for surfacey stuff, we kind of thought that I needed these things because that's how later on in life my stepdad would treat us in our family. So it's just funny because you think that you have an understanding, but it actually went a lot deeper than that way earlier on. Mm-hmm. So that's just another side note that like sometimes we think we have an understanding and we know what's going on, but until you actually dive deeper and do some uncovering, that's when it'll actually surface.
Yeah, it would have saved us a lot of suffering and like bickering and all that stuff too, right? So, yeah. And so, yeah, the last one is, the person who chooses receiving gift as their love language. So we've actually replaced this with the invisibility wound. And so what this means is that the core question of this is, do you remember me? And this is someone who chooses language, and that's their core question they'll ask themselves. And so a typical childhood of this person is feeling unseen, unnoticed, or overlooked. So examples of this is the quiet child in a chaotic home, parents distracted by work or other siblings, emotional neglect, or rarely feeling acknowledged.
Yeah, and this one's actually very interesting because obviously gifts was another one of my tops. And no, thinking about it now, I remember specifically not wanting gifts to be my number one because I didn't want you to think that I was all about material things. And so it was my number two, but I feel like they're actually both very equal for me because, I did go feeling unseen, unnoticed. My feelings were like the bottom of the list of everybody else. Like those were a huge amount of my emotions and my upbringing. And so, yeah, the gifts thing is definitely perceived as being very materialistic, very, like a gold digger kind of aspect, right? Like, oh, she needs like another gift. And like, what's it going to be now? Like a pair of pearl earrings? Like, it
Yeah.
had that kind of standard to it. So,
And I'm sure that's a common misconception of, especially a female, who pick that as their love language, right?
yeah.
But again, everything goes deeper. Like, this is why the love language doesn't work, because there's a deeper level that we're not reaching, and we're putting bandages on a very deep wound.
Yeah. And so, like, a lot of that would show up with, like, craving that attention, right? Or feeling hurt when someone forgets about, like, something that you specifically were like, this means a lot to me. And, like, I know they're going to remember. I know it. And then, like, they give you something and it's just like, ugh. That's not really, I told you about this. So why aren't you remembering? And then it becomes, like, this whole cycle of, like, well, I mentioned to you like 6 months ago how important this was to me, and like for you it would be like okay, well, sorry, it was 6 months ago, but for me it's like, wow, they don't care about me because they didn't I wasn't important enough for you to remember that one thing that I told you 6 months ago. And that's the kind of things that I would hold on to as well. And that comes with resentment, right? I feel like I'm not ever acknowledged. And this actually shows up a lot in our earlier dating stages with you drinking alcohol, right? We talked about this in the cost of addiction, because when Tom would have a drink, I felt like, I felt resentment and you were doing it on purpose to hurt me. And I wasn't important enough for you to think about me in those times.
Yeah, it's actually so cool to hear, you talk about this now, and just kind of the mistakes that we made of our younger selves. And and that's how fights would start, right? Like, that's how tension would build. And I feel like, for couples who been together for a while, and, they're the ones that bicker, or like, as a even worse result, they get divorced. Most of them don't even remember the fights that would be fighting about. And yeah, because, because it all involves dancing around the subject, right? The subject of, like, you have to go back, and you have to go way back.
But yeah, I mean, those are the 5 replacements that we have come up with. And yeah, we feel really passionate about it. Like, we're very excited that we have made these connections, and just realizing how too surfacey everything is. That just feels like life. It feels like the connections you have. Like, everything just feels so surface level when we really need to be digging deep within ourselves, because love languages is basically implying that other people should be the ones to make you happy. And that's just very far from the truth. It comes from healing within.
All right, guys. And for those of you who stuck around till the end, we actually have a cool surprise for you. So we've created our own wound language sheet that you can determine for yourself what your wound level is at. And from there, you can find out what your top wound is and how to begin your own healing journey. So go to www.rawparentingpodcast.com and you get a free downloadable test that you can take.